The amazing moment a billionaire discovers his father's hidden connection with the Maid. Jake Sullivan stared at the dark clouds gathering over New York City, the rain trickling down the glass walls of his penthouse, mirroring the turmoil inside him. His father's sudden passing had thrown him into a whirlwind of emotions, a blend of grief, anger, and an unsettling hollowness. What should have been a day of mourning felt instead like a celebration of emptiness. Surrounded by opulence, Jake felt a void he couldn't shake, a growing disconnect from the man who'd built everything from scratch. The pressure of being a billionaire weighed heavily on his shoulders, yet his wealth seemed futile in the absence of his father's guidance. As he sorted through his father's dusty office, tracing memories that slipped like sand through his fingers, he stumbled upon a small, intricately carved wooden box. It beckoned to him, something from an old world, his world. Curiosity gnawed at him, battling against a rising tide of apprehension. What could be hidden within? The thought of discovering more about the father he barely understood seemed intoxicating, yet the very act also felt like trespassing into a territory where privilege didn't belong. With shaky hands, he opened the box, revealing a trove of letters and faded photographs that enchanted him and haunted him in equal measure. As he started to read, the words began painting a picture of his father as a young man, determined, vulnerable, and deeply human. Among the letters, Jake found correspondence with Rosa, the family maid who'd been a constant presence during his upbringing. His heart raced. He knew of Rosa, but only as a passing figure in their household. Discovering the bond between her and his father felt like an intrusion, yet he couldn't look away. Suddenly, the foundations of his life felt shaky. Was this what he was missing? Through these letters, he realized that his father's strength had been bolstered not just by ambition, but by respect and love. A connection that Jake had ignored, entrenched as he was in his world of power lunches and exclusive gatherings. Each line unveiled layers of his father's life that Jake could not reconcile with the image of the man he knew. The struggle, the relentless pursuit of dignity, it all echoed back to Jake, chipping away at the golden veneer of his existence. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. Faced with the mounting evidence of Rosa's crucial role in his father's journey, Jake felt a tempest stirring within. He had always viewed his life through a lens tinted with privilege, sanitizing the grit and sacrifice that paved his way. Now, every word he read peeled back layers of denial, exposing raw wounds of guilt and shame. Did he even know whom he had become? The effortless glide into business meetings felt misplaced against the backdrop of Rosa's dreams of advancement that he once ignored. Every moment of his father's life that had intertwined with Rosa now felt like a heavy chain, granting weight to Jake's own success. Standing at the cusp of revelation, Jake was confronted with the aching truth. Could he bridge the chasm between the silver spoon and blue-collar grit? As he pondered the complexity of their intertwined destinies, doubt clawed at him. He wrestled with the fear that pursuing this connection could unveil dark familial secrets, unspeakable truths that would shatter the pedestal upon which he stood. Night fell, the rain pounding against the glass, mirroring the pounding in his chest. Jake felt the specter of societal expectations swirling around him, tightening like a noose. Would he remain bound to the life of luxury, or could he honor his father's legacy and embrace the lessons of humility and hard work? As he prepared to reach out to Rosa, the weight of that decision loomed larger than any business deal he had ever faced. Jake was at war with himself. The billionaire he had become danced dangerously close to losing the man his father had hoped he would be. Just as he picked up his phone to take that first step, it rang, an unfamiliar number flashing on the screen, demanding his attention. Amid the tempest of his thoughts, everything felt like it hung in the balance, teetering perilously before him. Jake's thumb hesitated over the screen, the stark light illuminating his troubled expression. He swiped to answer, feeling the weight of the moment as a stranger's voice flooded through. It was a lawyer, representing Rosa. The mere mention of her name sent waves of unease crashing over him. A burgeoning connection with the maid who had served his family for years was slipping through his fingers, overshadowed by an impending responsibility he had yet to comprehend fully. "Mr. Sullivan, I trust this is a good time," the voice began, smooth but formal. "I have important matters to discuss regarding your father's estate and Rosa's involvement. She is seeking acknowledgement of her contributions, both in service and personal ties." Personal ties? The phrase struck Jake like a cold slap. While the news was expected, there had always been whispers of his father's unique relationship with Rosa. Jake's thoughts tangled in a web of discomfort. The billionaire status he had inherited didn't equip him for this. He was a man drenched in privilege, trying to navigate uncharted emotional waters. As the lawyer detailed the options, Jake sensed vital truths could be ensnared within the intricacies. Could he disentangle himself from the legacy of his father's secrets? Could he confront the feelings that mingled with duty? The thoughts spiraled, taunting him with visions of confrontation and reconciliation. With each passing second, Jake recognized the potential to evolve if he embraced this unexpected reality. "Give me time to consider my next steps," he finally said, conscious of the weight of his voice. The lawyer's farewell echoed in his ears, culminating in a silence that felt suffocating. Jake took a deep breath, absorbing the gravity of the moment, ready for the entangled paths of his life to collide. Rosa had been more than a housekeeper. She had been a foundation, supporting his father through trials that hardly graced the rooms of this glittering penthouse. What meaning did her life hold beyond the borders of their estate? And what, in turn, did her involvement reveal about his father? The tug-of-war between honoring his father's memory and acknowledging Rosa's significance became Jake's new focus. He paced his penthouse, the first step tangible beneath his feet, but the journey ahead felt uncertain and tumultuous. He recalled the letters, each word a resonance vibrating with the echoes of past connections, as his resolve solidified into determination. Perhaps it was time to confront these entangled lives head-on, to seek Rosa out, to acknowledge her, not just as a link to his father, but as someone who had played an undeniable role in shaping the man he was struggling to understand. With a newfound clarity mingled with trepidation, Jake composed an email to Rosa. As he typed the words, "I would like to meet," he felt fear and excitement colliding inside him, a reminder that his journey was only just beginning. With the email sent, Jake leaned back, surrendering to the gravity of what lay ahead. He couldn't dismiss Rosa any longer. Perhaps this was the defining moment. It felt like destiny beckoning him forward. But just as he let out a sigh of relief, the notification chimed from his phone again. Another message, marked with urgency. "You need to be aware of something crucial about your father's past." The world around him faded. His next steps weren't merely an escape from privilege, but an awakening to truth. Jake sat at his desk, the screen flickering dimly in the subdued light of his penthouse. The recent conversations swirled in his mind, each thought crashing into the next like waves against a weathered shoreline. "Crucial about your father's past." The words felt like a trigger, igniting a deep curiosity mingled with dread. What deeper currents laid beneath the polished surface of his father's existence, and how did Rosa fit into it all? His finger slid over the notification, revealing a message from the lawyer, details he hadn't anticipated. The contents rushed at him with urgency, layered with implications. His grip tightened on the edge of the desk, a physical cue to ground himself, to focus on the identity he had almost forgotten in the tangle of inheritance and legacy. Was he merely a reflection of his father's achievements, or was there more he could become by confronting the shadows of his lineage? The notion of Rosa as a link to his father's untold stories twisted within him. She was not just a maid. She represented an era of intimacy he had dismissed in the face of his family's mainstream narrative, one painted in prestige and solitude. Delving into her perspective might unearth revelations about not only his father, but also himself. Jake was aware that every family secret unearthed raised the stakes of his personal journey. He had to engage with the truth. Plans began to materialize. Jake picked up the phone, dialing the lawyer's number again. This time, his voice carried a steadier timbre. "I want to know everything about my father, about Rosa, about this estate." Each word felt heavy with newfound determination. The lawyer directed him through the maze of documents that would soon become pivotal. Signatures and testimonies. It was more than just the wealth of a billionaire. It was a complex web of relationships and legacies, tied together by something Jake was only beginning to grasp. Hanging up, he felt emboldened, yet trembling with uncertainty. He grabbed a jacket and left the penthouse, sliding into the city's pulse outside. Every step he took in the lively streets felt transformative, invigorating. It was as if every person he passed mirrored his own journey toward self-discovery, each face holding stories of their own, struggles, evolutions, revelations. Rosa's face flitted through his mind. Her warmth seemed to contrast the cold dealings of wealth and power he had grown accustomed to. She had navigated a world that often overlooked her, yet she thrived in resilience, a trait he knew he needed now. As he moved through the city, he contemplated the imbalance of privilege and service, the unacknowledged contributions of those often marginalized. Resilience and compassion would guide him in the coming days. He recalled the letters, but they were more than a means to remember. They were stepping stones toward embracing the person he needed to become. Jake's destination materialized, an old cafe renowned for its vibrant energy and stories steeped in history. He stepped inside, the aroma of coffee evoking a comfort reminiscent of childhood. His gaze swept over the crowd, seeking connections, yearning for understanding. The spark in his heart grew, driven by the anticipation of meeting Rosa. A pivotal decision lingered ahead, a confrontation with the veils of secrecy enveloping his father, and a chance to honor Rosa's journey. As he settled at a table, sipping coffee, he drafted his own questions. Who was he beyond his father's shadow? What legacy would he build upon? His thoughts interrupted as a familiar notification chimed once more. The lawyer again. "We need to meet. There's more you need to know." The air thickened with tension at the weight of fresh revelations. He steeled himself, bracing for the impending truths that might shape his path further. In this moment, he realized the next step would either fracture his identity or solidify it. What awaited him in that meeting could redefine everything he thought he understood about love, loyalty, and legacy. Curiosity pressed against his chest as he pictured Rosa's face. He couldn't delay any longer. The decision was unavoidable, the confrontation necessary. Jake was ready to unveil the truth, aware that each layer peeled away would lead him closer to the man he must become. The moment of truth loomed closer with each tick of the clock. Jake glanced at his watch, the seconds slipping through his fingers as he made his way back through the bustling city streets. Anticipation coursed through him, mingling with the twinges of anxiety that settled in his gut. The cafe had become a sanctuary, an interlude where he could gather his thoughts before diving deeper into the waters of truth with Rosa. A flicker of hope intertwined with trepidation accompanied him. He knew this meeting could alter the trajectory of his existence. As he approached the lawyer's office, the antiseptic corporate atmosphere contrasted sharply with the warmth of the cafe. The intricacies of wealth and legacy hung thick in the air, weighty and suffocating. Stepping into the lobby, Jake felt smaller, an imposter among the polished professionals. He took a breath, reminding himself of his purpose. He wasn't just there to learn about his father's past, he was there to reclaim his identity, to step into the fullness of who he was meant to be. He was ushered into the lawyer's office, a detached space filled with meticulously arranged shelves of law books and framed diplomas. The walls felt more like barriers than decorations. The lawyer, a polished, middle-aged man with a practiced smile, gestured for Jake to sit. "I'm glad you decided to come in," he said, opening a thick folder on his desk and rifling through documents. "There are some details about your father's estate that you need to know." Words washed over him, but Jake struggled to focus. The prospect of facing the truth surrounding his family felt like an approaching storm. He had always seen his father's success as a fortress, impenetrable and grand. Now, within those walls lay secrets, his father's humanity beyond the title of a billionaire. "What about Rosa?" Jake interrupted, urgency lacing his tone. "The maid who worked for my family?" The lawyer's expression shifted slightly, his eyes narrowing as he assessed Jake. "Rosa, yes. Well, she's integral to the story. There are aspects of your father's life, and your own, that may shed light on her role." Jake leaned forward, heart hammering. "What do you mean? What did she know?" The lawyer continued, breaking down a haphazard timeline of events that revealed glimpses of vulnerability and hidden connections. He spoke of family dinners where she was present, how she shared pieces of their lives that were often concealed behind the family's curated facade. The more he heard, the more Jake realized that he had lived within layers of detachment. His father's accomplishments had overshadowed the rich, textured reality of human experiences beneath. "Your father trusted Rosa, more than you might understand. Their relationship was complex. She became a confidant, and with that came stories of his challenges and regrets. Each revelation was a thread, pulling Jake closer to understanding not only his father, but the diverging paths of his own life. As the lawyer laid out legal documents, Jake sensed the gravity of the choices in those pages. They could fragment his perception or solidify his resolve. Suddenly, he saw a connection. Rosa was not just a bystander to his father's legacy, she was entwined in its very fabric. The acknowledgement filled him with purpose, a call to confront these threads before unraveling completely. "Can you arrange a meeting with her?" The question escaped before he could filter the urgency laced within it. It felt like a demand, an affirmation of his newly emerging self. The lawyer regarded him with a mixture of caution and intrigue. "That may complicate things. She hasn't been involved in your family's affairs for some time." Jake nodded, determination hardening within him. "Then it's time she should be. I need to speak to her." The tension in the room escalated as the weight of hidden stories pressed down on him. The decision to reach out to Rosa opened a reawakening, igniting a fierce question in his mind. How far was he willing to go to reclaim not just his narrative, but to honor the hidden people who shaped it? Jake exited the lawyer's office, the sun casting long shadows as evening approached. The warmth of determination flowed through him. He felt alive, engaged in a quest. He needed to act before darkness consumed the opportunity. Meeting Rosa was a step towards his own transformation. The mingling fears and hopes wrapped around him as he accepted the path now unfolding. But as he prepared for this encounter, a sense of foreboding edged closer. The intricate connections of his father's life were just the beginning. What secrets might Rosa reveal, and how would they challenge everything he thought he understood? With her on the verge of becoming part of his journey, he could no longer escape the inevitable truth. Facing his past meant redefining himself, even if it cracked open long-held beliefs about his family. As he stepped into the night, Jake became acutely aware that the real moment of truth was approaching. That confrontation with Rosa might uncover reflections that threatened to break him, yet could equally forge a new identity. Would he be ready for what was to come? Jake sat in his car, gripping the steering wheel tightly as he replayed the lawyer's words in his mind. The sun had fully dipped below the horizon, leaving a hush across the city, a stark contrast to the turmoil bubbling within him. The streets felt foreign, shadows swallowing familiar corners as he drummed his fingers nervously. The prospect of meeting Rosa loomed larger than any towering skyscraper. He recalled Rosa's name and the jeering tone that had accompanied it in his family's household. She had always been the undercurrent of their lavish dinners, the invisible woman who scurried about, attending to matters beneath their notice. But she had been part of the intricate lattice that held the family together, a thread woven through their lives in a way he had never appreciated. The determination to reach out to her surged once more, a flame igniting his thoughts. Jake recognized this feeling. It was the ember of rebellion against everything he had been programmed to believe. The last vestiges of his father's world, so glossy and impenetrable, felt fragile now as questions began to surface. What had he been taught to overlook? What stories might Rosa weave that could illuminate the darkness he'd been shrouded in for far too long? He pulled out his phone, hesitating as he scrolled through his contacts. The number to the law firm was easy. Rosa's remained elusive, a ghost haunting his fingertips. The lawyer had said she hadn't been involved for years, which meant reaching her would require more than just inquiry. It would mean stepping into territories that no longer respected boundaries. "Where do I start?" he murmured to himself. Frustrated, Jake tossed his phone onto the passenger seat. A thought struck him with sudden clarity. Rosa had known his father's vulnerabilities, the ways he'd faltered. As much as he felt compelled to confront Rosa, he realized he was ultimately preparing to confront himself as well. The victory would not merely lie in uncovering her connection, but in understanding the relationship dynamics at play, the power and vulnerability that intertwined. He remembered the details the lawyer had shared: family dinners, shared moments of sorrow between his father and Rosa. With the chaos rising in him, he began to contemplate what those dinners had masked, a truth cloaked in silence that could alter everything he ever thought he knew. What would he find in the confines of that truth? The more he considered it, the more a plan loomed in his mind. This meeting with Rosa could be his first step toward understanding the man behind the title, to dismantle the image of his father as merely a titanic success story. Maybe that was the key to unlocking not only his father's legacy, but his own potential. Tomorrow, he decided aloud, determination braiding itself with anticipation, "I'll visit her." The words echoed in his mind, providing a pulse of motivation as he envisioned how he could approach the conversation. As he drove through the winding streets, darkness enveloping every corner, the weight of impending confrontation swirled within him. The atmosphere shifted. A sense of clarity began to overwrite the haze of confusion he'd carried. This moment was not just about discovery. It embodied transformation. Jake was not merely an observer anymore. He was a participant in a painful reality woven with love, betrayal, and ultimately redemption. With that evolution came a hint of dread. Would Rosa welcome his intrusion, or would she close the door on the past he dictated? The existential battle within him crescendoed as he glanced up at the stars, just starting to puncture the night sky. Each pinprick of light shimmered with secrets, longing to be unearthed. Jake parked the car and sat in the silence, reflecting on the journey ahead. Each revelation around Rosa could be a blade slicing through the familiarity of his father's narrative. The stakes were higher than he anticipated. To confront her would mean he might have to confront his deepest fears about love, loyalty, and identity itself. He exhaled slowly, letting the weight of the night's anticipation wash over him. Jake was ready. It was time to challenge everything he knew, to pursue a truth that, while daunting, promised to set him free. As he stepped out of the car, the night air cool against his skin, one question reverberated in his mind. What would he discover about himself through Rosa's truth? The next chapter of his life was about to unfold, and he stood on the precipice, ready to leap into the unknown. The sun peeked over the horizon, bathing the world in a soft, golden light as Jake paced outside his car. He had spent the night wrestling with the decision to reach out to Rosa, rehearsing their potential conversation until every imagined scenario played out like a reel in his mind. Each step toward her home felt heavier, weighed down by the dread of what he might uncover. Facing his own reflection in the car window, Jake took a moment to analyze his appearance. Gone were the days of fastidious grooming. Today, he simply needed to be genuine, raw. The layers of formality accumulated over years of familial expectations crumbled at the thought of his mission. He had donned a plain shirt and jeans, a statement against the polished image he'd always presented to the world. Beneath the soft facade of his upbringing, a complexity simmered. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for the car door. He had to remind himself this was not merely a visit, it was a reckoning. As he made his way to the front door, he grappled with the conflicting emotions rising within him. Today, he would unearth the truths shrouded in family secrets, and perhaps discover who he was beneath the layers laid by others. Jake knocked, his heart pounding in rhythm with a mixture of anxiety and resolve. The door opened slowly, revealing Rosa, slightly aged yet vibrant, inciting waves of nostalgia. She looked at him with cautious curiosity, her eyes sharp yet gentle, reading the turmoil etched across his face. "Jake," she said, her voice steady and warm. "It's been a while." He nodded, the familiar name suddenly heavy with implications. "I need to talk to you." The plea slipped out before he could filter it through the armor of reserve he had worn for so long. Rosa's brow furrowed, and a hint of concern flickered across her features. She stepped aside to let him in, and as he crossed the threshold, he felt the weight of 1,000 unspoken words encircle them. "Have a seat," she gestured, towards a modest living room adorned with modest yet meaningful details, a stark contrast to the opulence he had grown up with. Each element seemed representative of stories buried too deep to surface in lavish surroundings. Jake settled into the chair, the starkness of his emotions making him acutely aware of everything at play. "I've been thinking about my father, and what he never told me about you," he began, voice wavering at the edges. "About your relationship with him, the dinners, the moments that felt off." Rosa regarded him for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "Your father was complicated. He often hid behind success, but there were pieces of him that never aligned with that image." Her gaze never wavered, but Jake could sense the cautious distance she placed between them. "Why didn't you come forward? Who were you to him?" Jake's voice cracked open the expectation he had thought to build around his father's legacy. It was a raw question, demanding an unfiltered answer. Rosa leaned back, sighing deeply. "I don't think you're ready for the truth about him," she replied softly. But the gravity of her words sent a shiver across his spine. "Try me," Jake urged, summoning whatever courage was left. The ground felt unsteady beneath him, the uncertainties swirling around his family legacy threatening to consume him. Rosa nodded, as if surrendering to the necessary confrontation. "He once confided in me about his fears, Jake. Not just his fears of failure, but his fear of being vulnerable. He wore a mask of confidence, but inside he was scared of the world, of being truly seen." As she spoke, her voice began to unearth fragments of his father he had never considered, a man plagued by the weight of unfulfilled dreams and hidden pains. Each revelation peeled back the layers of entitlement he had worn, exposing vulnerabilities he had never been taught to acknowledge. Why didn't he share this with me? With me? Jake felt the flickers of anger, betrayal, and sorrow ready to ignite. Who was he if not a son in his father's shadow? "Because he felt protecting you meant hiding his truth," Rosa whispered. "He thought that shielding you from that pain was a sign of strength." "Strength," Jake scoffed. the word tasting bitter on his tongue. What's strong about abandoning the truth? Suddenly, he was aware of the profound irony. In seeking to learn about his father's weaknesses, he was beginning to strip away his own. He had become unmoored from the ties of his upbringing, grasping for clarity in the shadows of their shared past. With a newfound determination, Jake squeezed out a question barely formed in his mind. So, who am I if I'm not defined by his legacy? Rosa's eyes softened, an invitation wrapped in understanding. You are what you choose to become, but you must confront the truth first. The air between them crackled with palpable tension, as Jake grappled with the enormity of her words. There was a doorway opening ahead, but would he have the courage to step through? The potential to redefine not just his relationship with his father, but his own identity lay in this moment. The stakes. Jake realized that perhaps understanding really meant confronting his legacy more directly than he ever imagined. As he sat there, grappling with her insights, he felt an undeniable urge to persist. What else is there, Rosa? What must I face next? Jake leaned forward, urgency threading through him. He needed more than just words. He craved clarity, something to anchor this swirling chaos within. What else could he be hiding? What else don't I know? Rosa hesitated, her eyes darting to a framed photograph on the mantel, a visual echo from their past. His father's triumphant smile, a stark contrast to the turmoil Jake felt within. She opened her mouth, paused, and then began. Your father had another side, one you may not recognize. There was a bond between us, one that went beyond the roles we played. Her admission staggered him, unraveled his notions of who his father was. He had lived in a world dictated by his father's achievements, draped in triumphs and accolades, but this new perspective unspooled the narrative he thought he understood. Anger crept back, fueled by years of kept secrets. What do you mean? Was it an affair? Was I a product of a lie? Each word bore intensity, revealing his fear of never fully knowing himself. Rosa's demeanor shifted, her expression a mix of regret and sympathy. It was a complicated relationship. He confided in me, a friendship forged in vulnerability. Yes, there were moments that blurred the lines. Emotional intimacy, yes, but not necessarily a dalliance. Jake's heart raced. So my whole life has been based on a lie, then? The word lie tumbled out, heavy and suffocating. No, Jake, a classification of truth. Your father loved you dearly, but he was terrified of being seen as anything other than the successful man everyone idolized. Her tone softened, becoming almost protective. He feared you'll end up inheriting his vulnerabilities, and that's what drove him. As she spoke, Jake found himself grappling with the implications of this revelation. Was he replicating his father's fear by avoiding self-exploration? Had he lived a facade as well? Conviction surged through him as he wrestled with his nascent realization. I need to find out more. I can't allow his choices to dictate my future, he declared, a steely clarity wrapping around the edges of his voice. Rosa studied him, and he could see the flicker of hope in her eyes, similar to the recognition of a long-lost friend. You must understand, Jake. This path will not be easy, Jake. The truth often wields a jagged edge. I'm ready for it, he replied firmly. What's next? Rosa took a measured breath, her demeanor now imbued with an urgency he hadn't seen before. There are things your father kept secret, documents, letters. They're in an old storage unit. I have the key. You'll find pieces of your family's story there. Documents! The word teased another whirlwind of questions in his mind. What else had his father hidden? What would he discover about the man he had thought he knew? Yes, But don't confuse the truths you find with absolutes. Every story has layers, Jake. You'll learn not just about him, but about yourself in the process. She leaned forward, intensity radiating from her as she locked eyes with him. You have to be prepared for what those layers might mean. He felt the tug of anticipation vie with the weight of fear within him, an electric tingle that hinted at the transformative journey ahead. I'll go, right now. The resolve surged like a tidal wave, relentless and unyielding. As he stood to leave, the heaviness of the truth loomed large, but so did the promise of uncovering the pieces of himself that had eluded him for so long. This wasn't merely the pursuit of his father's hidden life. It was a quest for his own identity, shadowed by the past but brightened by the prospect of self-discovery. With Rosa handing him the key to his father's forgotten storage unit, Jake felt an awakening, a belief that this venture could lead him beyond just understanding his father. It could become the foundation of who he might choose to be. And as he headed towards the door, a thought struck him with a sudden urgency. What if the truths he uncovered transformed not only his understanding of his father, but reshaped the narrative of his own future? The journey loomed ahead, treacherous yet enlightening. What if I find something I'm not ready to face? He whispered, more to himself than anyone else, as he unlocked a path to a legacy that spanned beyond familial ties and ventured into the depths of his very soul. What other revelations awaited him in that storage unit, hovering just beyond the threshold of his newfound courage? The door to the storage unit creaked open, echoing in the silence with a haunting familiarity. Dust motes floated lazily in the dim light, clinging to the edges of containers and boxes that held more than just dead air. They held echoes of a life intertwined with secrets. Jake hesitated on the threshold, the weight of anticipation mingling with trepidation. This was not merely an exploration of his father's possessions, but an excavation of his own psyche. He stepped inside, the familiar scent of aged wood and forgotten memories wrapping around him. The key Rosa had handed him felt heavy in his pocket, a talisman of sorts, but also a reminder of the burdens lurking within these walls. He began to sift through the visual remnants of his father's life, each item an artifact of the man he had idolized and now questioned. Among stacks of dusty boxes, Jake's hand brushed against a leather-bound journal. It was worn, its edges tattered, inviting him to pry into intimate thoughts penned by the man he thought he knew. Settling onto a nearby crate, he flicked open the journal, revealing cursive that rolled across the pages, alive with emotion, yet foreign to him. He skimmed through snippets, searching for clues about the father who had shielded his vulnerabilities, notes about business meetings, listless evenings, and then, in stark contrast, letters filled with an urgency that ignited a flicker of confusion in his chest. It was as if he'd stumbled upon a hidden compartment in his father's soul. One entry caught his eye, dated years before Jake's birth. It spoke of love and loss, a vivid portrayal of a connection that seemed to exist outside of the accolades and the imposing images Jake remembered. It was about someone unnamed, a beacon of strength in dark times, emotions laid bare. Jake's heart raced. Who was this person? He found himself pondering how his father's deep-seated fears had shaped not only his own upbringing, but had also been a cage around the man he could have been. In a way, Jake understood all too well that duplicity, the facade that masked emotional suffering. Compulsively, he jotted down his thoughts in the margins of the journal, a realization awakening within him. He could rewrite his narrative. It didn't have to echo the confined script of his father. The more he delved, the more paradoxes emerged. Each entry was laced with admiration for the very qualities Jake had dismissed in his own life. His father had battled insecurity and self-doubt, reflecting an internal struggle that mirrored Jake's own. This was profound, a revelation interlaced with empathy that began to soften the hard edges of resentment. As he searched deeper into the boxes, he uncovered more letters, photographs of joyful moments shared with a woman who appeared frequently in his father's musings. Who was she? Had Jake ever met her? Each snapshot of laughter and warm embraces chipped away at the pedestal upon which he had placed his father, and yet it filled him with strength. Maybe he could face the complexities of his identity and transform them into something meaningful, rather than remain shackled to perceptions of absolute success. Suddenly, a thud from behind him broke the trance, pulling him back into reality. Jake turned sharply to find a box that had toppled over, spilling its contents onto the floor. Among the chaos, a small envelope lay partially open, revealing a name that felt achingly familiar: Rosa's. Instinctively, he flipped it over, and a wave of anxiety washed over him. Had this connection run deeper than he had imagined? He gathered his thoughts, the puzzle pieces swirling in his mind. The time for contemplation was over. He faced the journal once again, the pages now stained with his transformative insights. Just as Jake felt the embers of determination ignite within him, another key truth emerged, burning fiercely at the periphery of his consciousness. The deeper he dug into his father's past, the more he unearthed about his own failures, fears, and a newfound hope for embracing authenticity. What would this all mean when he finally confronted Rosa about what he discovered? Could their shared histories intertwine, leading to a new understanding of familial bonds? Jake stood, heart racing with the realization that he was on the verge of a confrontation that would redefine everything. He sensed an awakening, an urgent drive that propelled him forward, aiming to face the uncertainties and connect the threads of his family's history. The journey was far from over, and he could feel it pulse beneath his skin. The inevitable moment of truth was drawing closer. What revelations would await him when he returned to Rosa, and how would they reshape their lives moving forward? Jake stood in the storage unit, the powerful revelations swirling in his mind like the disarray of boxes tumbling around him. Each word he read from his father's journal seemed to resonate deep within, echoing the themes of love, loss, and an exploration of identity he had postponed for too long. The familiarity of the cluttered space engulfed him, each object whispering secrets, beckoning him to confront the truths he had long buried. With resolve, he pocketed the journal. He needed to face Rosa, to disentangle the threads binding their histories and confront the demons lurking in the shadows of his family's past. How had Rosa, a woman whose life was intricately woven into his father's narrative, maneuvered into his life without Jake even realizing it? The questions clawed at his consciousness, demanding answers. He stepped out of the unit, his vision sharpening with a sense of purpose. As he strode through the parking lot, an urgency coursed through his veins. He could feel the weight of his father's secrets pushing him forward, not just to face Rosa, but to redefine his own path. This moment was pivotal. He was at the junction of personal transformation and familial confrontation. Arriving at his home, he paused, hand poised over the doorknob. The air felt thick, charged with unspoken words and buried sentiments. Jake had avoided exploring the complexities of his relationships for far too long, often settling for shallow interactions that fostered his fears rather than confronting them. The unresolved tension he felt towards Rosa and memories of his father stirred an intense mix of anticipation and dread. Inside, the space was dim, chaotic, yet oddly comfortable. Shadows danced in the soft light, and as he moved toward the living room, he spotted Rosa. She sat, surrounded by the remnants of a life they had built together, her fingers tracing the fabric of a throw blanket on the couch. "Rosa," he called gently, his voice steady yet uncertain. "Jake, you look different," she said, tilting her head slightly. It was an observation that echoed the awakening within him, a change he barely recognized but could sense vibrating between them. "I've found some things," Jake began, brushing the back of his hand against his forehead in frustration. "About my father, and about us." His words hung in the air like dust, thick and laden with implications. Rosa's eyes widened, a flicker of recognition crossing her face. "Is it about the letters?" she asked, each word measured, revealing a deeper understanding than he anticipated. "Jake," nodded, taking a step closer, as if drawing strength from her proximity. "Yes, there's a connection between you and him that I never appreciated. What did he mean to you?" The atmosphere shifted, thickening with unsaid emotions. He could see the deliberation in her gaze, the way her lips pressed together as she mulled over their past, both shared and separate. "Jake, your father he was complicated," she started, her voice soft yet firm. "He saw the world in shades that many couldn't understand, just like you. He admired those who could rise above their struggles, and he had a way of making people feel important, alive." Her insights flooded into Jake, illuminating the uncharted territories of his father's life and legacy. But alongside her praise for his father came a sense of dread, tinged with revelation. "What about the woman in the journal?" he pressed, feeling the urgency of surrounding truths pulse in his veins. The name carried a resonance, a potential shift in everything Jake thought he understood about his father. Rosa's expression faltered, betraying her inner turmoil. "She was a friend, a confidant during dark times, someone your father leaned on when he felt lost." The words struck a nerve, igniting the fuse of conflict inside him. It was not merely about his father's hidden affiliations, it was a reflection of Jake's own demons, the fear of connectedness and vulnerability, the terror of how far familial love could stretch. "And what does that mean for us?" Jake asked, his tone sharper, demanding clarity as the line between personal and profound began to blur. He faced her, the gravity of the moment pressing down like a weight, challenging everything he thought he had known about love and trust. Rosa drew a deep breath, and Jake interpreted it as a sign that they stood on the precipice of something monumental. "It means we can redefine our relationship, if you're ready to confront the truth." The air crackled as Jake prepared for what lay ahead. The depth of their conversation heralded changes neither of them could fully apprehend yet. He felt the urge to confront not only Rosa, but also his own fears, the notion of stepping into authenticity with each word shared. As they stood at this juncture, Jake realized this was more than just an emotional confrontation. He was evolving, discovering the strength to embrace the complexities of familial love and loss. What he once saw as a burden now appeared to be an opportunity for connection, to understand not just his father's legacy, but his pathway toward healing. The moment loomed, loaded with implications. Each decision a thread that could weave their lives into a stronger tapestry, or unravel into confusion. Before they could steal their narrative, the weight of unspoken words hung in the air, waiting to be voiced. Would they navigate through the chaos together, or would their pasts become insurmountable barriers? With the intensity of anticipation thickening, Jake braced himself. The real confrontation was just beginning. Would this transparency lead them closer, or shatter the fragile connection they shared? As Jake sat across from Rosa in the dim light of her living room, a profound silence hung between them, thick with the emotional debris of the past. The moment spent unearthing the intricate details of his father's life and their shared histories felt monumental. He was teetering on the edge of transformation. He realized the convergence of their lives represented much more than secrets. It was a chance to self-actualize, a moment to prove to himself he could embrace both his privilege and his vulnerabilities. "I need to understand what your connection with my father truly meant," Jake said, searching Rosa's eyes for sincerity. The tension was palpable, yet as she met his gaze, he discerned a flicker of patience. "Your father relied on me when his world felt too heavy to bear, Jake. I provided him space to be human, not just a billionaire," she explained, her words rich with unspoken reverence. "He feared he might lose himself amid expectations. Each part of his life, his successes and failures, was intertwined with the choices he made. Our relationship was fundamental for him." Jake's heart raced. This was not just about unearthing his father's past. This was a pathway to understanding who he was and who he could become. The barriers he had built around his emotions were like sandcastles washed away by the tide, vulnerable yet liberating. Then, what does this mean for me? Jake pressed further, urgency infused in each syllable. Am I to become the man he was, or can I choose to break free from all of this? Rosa opened her mouth to respond, but paused, as though weighing heavy revelations upon her heart. You are not meant to inherit your father's fears. You are meant to construct your own legacy, one that honors your journey. The truth can be your ally, not your enemy. You can choose how much weight to carry from the past. Sitting forward, Jake felt his pulse quicken. It was as if a dam had broken, releasing a torrent of introspection he had kept at bay. He had spent years running from the disappointment and inadequacy plaguing his self-image, wrapped tightly in the inheritance of his father's legacy. I want to be authentic, to build something meaningful, not just uphold a legacy bound in gilded expectations, he declared, the conviction in his voice rising. With each word, he felt lighter, as if shackles were loosened from his wrists. Rosa nodded slowly, respect blooming in her eyes. Then let's embark on this journey together. It's never too late to reshape your narrative. Jake savored the notion that the path stretched before him, uncharted yet inviting. This was not just about his father anymore. It was a reclamation of his autonomy. He would mold his identity, flawed yet resolute. Let's go back to the storage unit, he suggested. It's time I face everything, every letter, every document. Let's uncover the truth together. The resolve in his heart pulsed with every syllable, propelling him into action. Adrenaline coursed through his veins as he realized that by confronting the echoes of the past, he wasn't merely seeking closure. He was laying the foundation for his future. In minutes, they arrived back at the storage unit. The heavy door creaked open, revealing remnants of obligations past. Jake stepped inside first, determination fueling him to sift through the chaos once more. Together, they navigated through the remnants of his father's life, each object a catalyst for growth. Jake found the old journal and letters again, each word a door into two lives, his father's and his own. As he shared his feelings of inadequacy, Rosa provided insight that anchored him. Understand that your journey is yours alone. Comparison will only shackle you to your fears. The journey matters, not the destination. With every revelation about his father intertwined with Rosa's nurturing wisdom, Jake began to cultivate a vision of himself unbound by outdated expectations. He could refashion his purpose, a truth that resonated deeply within him. The ultimate personal achievement lay not in his father's shadow, but in embracing the light of his individuality. In the weeks that followed, Jake started to build a foundation for his vision. He restructured his business, integrating values that championed empathy and collaboration. With Rosa's guidance, he brought forth a legacy rooted in understanding, a palpable echo of his father's vulnerabilities transformed into lessons for others. Finally, during a community meeting, he spoke of resilience, acknowledging the hidden sacrifices of those who labor silently behind the opulence. As Jake took center stage, the weight of the past melded into a catalyst for change, the visible tremors of his transformation evident in each word. Peeling away the masks of privilege had fortified his confidence, forging a new sense of purpose. The applause that erupted was validation not only of his achievements, but of his chosen identity. Jake stood tall, feeling the eyes of his father's memory watching over him. No longer a specter shadowing his legacy, but a guiding star illuminating his path forward. Jake Sullivan had confronted his past. He had not just acknowledged Rosa, but recognized the value of emotional connections over accolades. He emerged with courage, ready to craft a future illuminated by compassion, confident and resolved. For all those who have pursued their truth amid the burdens of the past, remember this: authentic change often begins with acknowledgement, and transformative growth lies in the courage to confront and embrace the unexpected. So now, more than ever, you need to subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that inspire and empower. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Your engagement makes all the difference. Don't wait even one more second to share this transformative journey with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Comment your reactions and theories about Jake's extraordinary journey. True fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of the collective support on this platform.